I'm Andrew Medvedev, co-dean of the school. My pleasure to welcome all of you to Dively. I'm not going to dwell on too long, but I just wanted to say that I've been a part of one of the more fascinating and thought-provoking meetings over the past hour with some of the folks that Diana gathered. The power of the community, the power of insight, the opportunity to connect practice to the ideas and begin the intentional conversations is what this place is all about. It is why JB and I took this role 50 days ago. It's to advance this kind of connectivity. And because of that, it's my great pleasure and honor to host Helena Haynes-Carter here. And to do that, I'll ask Dr. Bill Amoria to introduce her.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. I will also add my welcome to you, especially those of you who are here from KeyBank. Welcome, everyone. And welcome to our Case Western Reserve University students, colleagues, alumni. It's great to see everyone here. It is my pleasure now to introduce Helena Haynes-Carter, our Weatherhead Inclusive Excellence Distinguished Speaker for today's talk. Helena is the Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer for KeyBank. In this role, she is responsible for organizing and aligning strategic priorities, tactics, messaging, and operating systems for the DEI space throughout Key and the communities Key serves. With experience spanning the healthcare, financial services, energy, and public sector industries, Helena most recently served as Senior Director, Global Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion for United Health Group. In this role, Helena led enterprise-wide DEI strategic and business initiatives. During the COVID-19 pandemic, she orchestrated a $14 million response with community-based organizations throughout the US, deploying over 30,000 COVID-19 tests, wraparound services, and care referrals. Prior to that role, Helena was Vice President, Global Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion for US Bancorp, where she led enterprise and BIPOC segment strategy, as well as DEI-focused initiatives designed to achieve product growth. During her tenure, US Bancorp achieved its first Diversity Inc. Top 50 Best Company designation. She has also held past roles at organizations including Rocky Mountain Minority Supplier Development Council, Xcel Energy, and Colorado Housing and Finance Authority. Helena holds a bachelor's degree in business administration and marketing management from University of Colorado and an MBA from Hamline University. She is actively involved in a number of community organizations, industry councils, and currently serves on the board of the National Inroads, the nation's largest nonprofit source of paid internships for undergraduate diverse youth across the country. With this brief introduction, please join me in welcoming Helena Haynes-Carter.
Thank you. What a beautiful space, right? How many of you drove in here? Not very many people live in this little bit, right? Right. What did you see on your way? What did you see? It's fall. It's absolutely. That's what we're going to talk about, is what we saw and whether or not we can look beyond ourselves. Did you see this? This is exactly where we are. It is beautiful. So we're going to talk a little bit today about, we're going to do a situational analysis. We're going to talk about where we are. Then let's level set with some definitions. Love to talk to you about that experience I had in Minneapolis. We're going to talk about a collective impact model, give some examples around that, and then a call to action. Right? How do we create impact 5 minutes from this place, 5 miles from this place. And I think we can do it in 5 years. So where are we? What do you see? How did we get here? We are 3/4 of the way through 2022. And where do we go from here? In that previous conversation, we talked about a lot of companies made public commitments 2 years ago. But what about now? We should be talking about accountability. So this is what I saw. I see a beautiful campus. I see beautiful students. But as I'm coming to Cleveland, this is what people tell me they see. And this is Cleveland by the numbers. It's a pretty stark and dismal picture. But if we're going to do this work, then you have to look at the numbers. We have to have measurable impact. You know these probably better than I do. But I also see that there are opportunities. So this is a chart that I've been using for the past 3 or 4 years. It's called an area deprivation index. And the picture on the left is Ohio charted by a 21-point scale that pulls together education, healthcare outcomes, socioeconomic status. This past year, they changed the form so that it took away whether or not you have a phone at home, because so many people have cell phone numbers, but it pulls together a composite of 21 different variables to see deprivation. On the left is a statewide comparison. It is Ohio compared to itself. And we get down to the block grant level, right? So we're getting down to the neighborhood level here. But when I look at Ohio on the right, I see us compared to the rest of the country. It brings new context to the numbers we saw before. And when I look at this building, we are here. This is a bubble. And we have wealth and health on one side, but around the other parts, we see poverty, abject poverty. When I talk about 5 minutes, I've walked this campus 1,000,000 times. That I can walk 5 minutes and I continue to see these beautiful pictures. But when I step to the corner of Case, I see this. So let's level set. I always like to level set with some definitions because this is my point of view. I am a practitioner from a diversity, equity, and inclusion perspective. So I pulled these from Key. And I must say, here's my disclaimer, that some of the views that I may say may not necessarily represent the views of KeyBank. However, these are our definitions. When we talk about diversity, we really are talking about a full range of human experiences. Right? We've been hearing a lot about Black and white, right? But we're talking about all aspects of diversity, equity, specialized solutions that address imbalances against certain demographics and populations. Inclusion. I believe that inclusion is not just a feeling. It's something that is. It's about creating an environment where people feel valued, seen, respected, appreciated, and justice. That's a fix to the system. We can keep putting Band-Aids on this as much as we want to, but we need real fixes to the system, and it's complex. And then finally, belonging, right? Bringing our authentic selves to our spaces that we're in. I want to talk about igniting collective impact through diversity, equity, and inclusion. What do I mean by collective impact? I'm borrowing this term from community development and nonprofit organizations. A collective impact model is what you're seeing here, where we all get together, we all learn together, we are all part of the same system together. And in an integrated fashion, we begin to pull these threads of the ecosystem, as Andrew likes to say, together. But what's interesting about a collective impact model is that it's more than just cooperation. That when we're talking about communities, specifically communities of color, I'm gonna tell you, in the Black community, you don't just come into my community, you need to be invited into my community. And that's where real change happens. And that's the power of a community, of a collective impact model. We are even seeing scholars talk about more equity within the collective impact model. So these are the principles. It's important that we know them. It is more, again, more than just collaboration. We must have a common agenda where we have to sit down together and have a shared vision for what does success look like. We need to have measurable results. So we have to be able to collect and measure our results consistently. This is a long-term game. That the efforts that we pull together have to be mutually reinforcing. We can't do this over here and that over there. When you push one portion of the system, you know it's going to move in another way. How do we make allowances for that? Continuous communication. We got to keep talking about it. And sometimes it's going to be hard. Most of the time, it will be hard, but we have to continue to talk through the process. And finally, we need a backbone of support. Generally, a couple of organizations, everyone can't be on front, that are going to have the specific skill sets that are going to drive this forward. Generally, you have one supportive organization, and then other people anchor into that. You may have 2 or 3 others. So that's a collective impact model. I love this model. I've been doing it in many stages without knowing it for a lot of my career. And as I was doing the research, it was like, let me find out about the diversity that is in Cleveland. Because when I look at the numbers, it simply says Black and white, and then 2 or more races, and then the other ones in the circle got a little sliver. But Cleveland was built by these communities. I have a good friend when I was considering the role at Key who told me, don't sleep on Cleveland. They've got a lot of good stuff going on. And I came here and I found that to be true. But in my reading, we're also described as a paradox of a city. In my language, we have everything that we need, and yet we're not realizing our potential. This is 5 minutes away from where we sit today. And these 2 buildings are 5 feet apart. This actually is Case. You see the sculpture here, and on the other side of the street, you see new development. And this is a close-up of that same picture. I actually looked at these. They're about $350,000. So what gives us the right? What gives us the right in 2022 to say that we can take this on? I was talking to students earlier, and I will tell you, I am now unapologetic about it. That anytime I stand in the space, that gives me the right. And all of us have our own individual gifts. We all have the right. So if you're waiting for somebody else to do it, the cavalry is not coming to save us. Let me tell you a little bit about how I got here, what gives me the right. Started my career at the bottom at Standard & Poor's. Did not finish school in 4 years. And so I worked as I got my degree. Then took me to a very old intern for transit. So I know how infrastructure works, about access to jobs. We did our first disparity study there. I worked the entire organization. I was groomed to be a transit official. And as we were doing that disparity study, I caught the bug. I caught the diversity bug, and I didn't even know it. And so 7 years later, they had a DBE officer enterprise, officer role open, and I told my mentor, I want that job. And she said, no, you don't. I'm like, yes, I do. And she said, okay. And I earned it. And I got so tired of being the Black woman doing diversity without knowing how to do all the fixes, that I saved the organization millions of dollars by running capital programs, that I'd done many other things, but I couldn't fix the core of the problem. So I was recruited away to what became US Bank, corporate relations. You don't get an opportunity to manage someone's foundation. So to give away millions of dollars in K through 12 education, economic development, artistic and cultural enrichment, and environmental stewardship, that was awesome. But what I found is that we weren't at the table. The folks who looked like me didn't necessarily know how to write a grant. So we weren't even invited. And so after doing a lot of capacity building and teaching people and seeing it from so many different angles, I decided I cannot get another award for giving someone in our community a $2,500 grant when the chairman's wife can give $1 million for cats that basket weave. We were building a house at a time. So I became a manager for our developer. I got to know housing development. Now, I will tell you that I fought that job because I did not go to school for 6 years to get a double bachelor's. That's how many credits I had to be a salesperson. But I had 2 kids in elementary school. Actually, one wasn't even in elementary school. And I was like, I can take my kids to school, drop them off, work in my community. Oh my gosh, I can do that and make more money than I've ever thought I would make. Absolutely, I am on. So I worked for the state's largest private developer and planned a PUD. Then went on to do housing policy. So now I know finance, right? Standard & Poor's, CompuStat, they do M&As with that product. I can read a financial statement and its notes like nobody's business. I know infrastructure. I know housing. I know philanthropy. And I'm still doing work in our communities because that's what we do. Went to Excel Energy, worked with small businesses, for 3 years. I did such a good job. After 4 years, they said, Helena, they tap you. You should be our diversity and inclusion leader. And I'm like, oh no, I don't think I want that job. You've had 3 directors of diversity in 3 years. What would make me want to take that job? Never had a challenge that I wouldn't take. And so I was there for 3 years. Systems in place. Then I went to an MBDA under the Department of Commerce, helping large minority-owned businesses scale across the globe. $535 million worth of contracts, $333 million worth of deals during the Obama administration. I wish my mother had been alive to see that. And all that achievement looks like drain. And I decided I need to go back to corporate America because I'm trying to do the work and I'm trying to have impact and I'm trying to put it all together, but I just can't find the right place. I just can't find where I need to pull it all together. So I said, well, I'll go back to US Bank. By now, my ex-husband's like, are you sure you want to go back there? Like, absolutely. Absolutely. Because I've learned, with as much as I've learned, I still have more to learn. And this time I won't leave the space. I'll go work for someone else and learn new ways of doing it. And I had a chance to do that at US Bank. But I also had a chance to do the work globally. And that's eye-opening. When I was at US Bank the first time, I was inspired by the Grameen Bank model and the micro lending. And so all of the entrepreneurship stuff just started coming together. And why does that work other places but not work here in the US? Then to United Health Group, the largest integrated healthcare provider in the globe. And then finished my MBA, finally. And then George Floyd has been killed, publicly executed. I've been in Minneapolis, been working for a healthcare company. And I'm like, I will never know enough, but I can't hide. So I will go lead this space again, but do it for a company that really wants to do the work, that has a track record of doing the work. Little would I know that it would bring me here to CASE. Talk about some collective impact models, because now you've seen my journey, you've seen all of the pieces that build together. And so let me show you a little bit about the collective impact model and use it as an example during the pandemic. So it's March of 2020, and the newspapers are saying that Black folks are dying disproportionately, Black and brown folks are dying. And they asked me the question, Helena, can we be bold? I'm like, absolutely. Give me some money and we will figure it out. And they did. And so the first thing I did was started talking to stakeholders, talking to my family and my friends and other folks. What do you need? And they said, Helena, I've got to go to work. It's not that I can't pay my rent next month. I may not be able to pay it the month after that. And I don't know how long this is going to last. Oh, and you folks in healthcare, you keep changing the rules. You don't know what's going on anyway. So I've got to go to work. So after doing a lot of stakeholder interviews, we used the Area Deprivation Index to select 8 locations across the country. And we chose those areas that had the highest infection rates around COVID-19, as well as the highest mortality. We also chose places where we had health plans in place. This actually is coming from Orleans Parish is the example that I'm bringing here. And we pulled together all of our resources. So as I'm talking to stakeholders, I was also talking to the folks internally. What are all of the capabilities that we have that we can bring to bear? Because even though it's United Health Group and they seem like they're one umbrella, there are a lot of different companies. And there was urgency. Now, all of a sudden, everyone wanted to do something. Right place, right time. Then we asked for partnerships. And not the typical partnerships who we normally had. I could have gone to a spreadsheet, but I know if you're doing work in community, that the folks who we rely on for resources, y'all don't even know them. So you need to ask somebody. And then we would be not the 800-pound gorilla, United Health Group, 330,000 employees, number 5 on the Fortune 500, but we would stand behind you. That's a collective impact model. We put the organizations out front. We were trying to build trust. We knew that if we could build relationships, we talked about healthcare outcomes and people not going to emergency rooms. If we could build trust in our communities, that once we got past this, whenever it was, then we would be able to have laid some track. It's a transit analogy, forgive me. And so what people said they needed was a test. But you couldn't find toilet paper there. And so we put together a lot of different things that folks needed, but we came with our capability around testing. OptumServe is the organization within United Health Group that manages veteran services. And they work with veterans across the country. And so if you heard about where they were deploying in California testing, that was United Health Group. So as opposed to bringing in, forgive me, a white woman from Wisconsin to do tests in diverse communities, and here we were talking about New Orleans, Orleans Parish, and like we have clinical workers in our communities. So we hired people from the community, administrators and testers. We brought all the capabilities. We used our supply chain. We procured everything. We trained individuals on the protocols, and then we brought the testing capability. And then these were the supports we brought. Food. We partnered with local food banks. I'll show you this in action all across the country. We created this health and safety kit. It had a mask. This is before masks became politicized. Disinfectant. And then we had education. Yes, we had a sheet of paper. And we translated it in some cases, but we also partnered with diverse media companies. So I went and found PR companies that mirrored the demographics in the community and had them do the public service announcement. Talk to them about how do we do this? How do we do the QA? How do we bring Black doctors in? Because it's not as if people were uneducated and were just hesitant. People were not getting tested for real reasons that were real to them, and we needed to understand that. And then finally, we would have community impact. We did that. United Health Group was very early on its diversity, equity, and inclusion journey, and they have taken this program and they have now expanded it in the business. So this is what it looked like. We actually got down to the zip code level with the area deprivation index. And what we found is that in Orleans Parish, in New Orleans, they have more nonprofits than any other place per capita after Katrina that happened. And that these were the specific assets within the community that we could rely on as part of this model to help us. And FQHC is a federally qualified health center. And then this is what we brought. So Second Harvest Food Bank, real examples. We use diverse suppliers. to procure and to do the kitting of all of our supplies, because this is about economic impact as well. That these were our educational materials, who we deployed them through, and then we did referral services. So HANA was actually the housing authority of New Orleans. I was asked, could I do something bold in March? And we had this stood up July 1st, deploying out into the communities. In Colorado, involved in a collective impact model, I'm going to play a little bit of this. This is the data. They have been collecting the data for quite some time, and they called it Losing Ground. I could say that about Cleveland.
We can point back to some of the post-civil rights gains, but also some of the advent of an introduction of some of the crack cocaine and some of the incarceration rates. Thereby creating achievement gaps of our young people, thereby creating decreased graduation rates, and beginning to erase a lot of the gains, whether it was in home ownership, economic gains, a lot of things and a lot of ills that we are challenged with today.
There still is a major problem that's a concern, I think, to all of us, and that is the challenge that's come about in a society that involves high technology and places a premium on quality education. That shortfall in education, or the advantage of an education, makes a huge difference in salary. That is a concern, I think, to all Americans as you go forward.
And I could keep going, but it could be here. It is here. And these are their statistics. It looks a lot like Cleveland. So we had all the numbers. And we said, we have the right to stand in the room and make a difference. So we pulled together an initiative specifically in the African American community. And at the top, I put some of the notes from our charter, and that was a vision for African American leadership, that we would do this collective impact in a way that minimizes competition, that would attract funders. And we had all of these folks together. We had a common agenda. We went down the playbook. And it didn't work. Because at some point, we had a group that decided they knew best. And what we had decided we would do together, they knew better. They knew some of the stakeholders better. They had worked with them better. And our funders told us, if you don't stick together, we will not fund you. That's around continuous communication. Do you see how they work together? And we submitted the grant application, and I received a phone call the next morning, and I said, Tracy, did you get our grant? And she said, yes, but we're going to disqualify you. We're not going to fund you. Because I got a call last night from somebody else. They just went just a little bit off, because they thought their individual knowledge was better than that of the collective. They could nudge it along. They stepped out of the fold. That was 2013. This is work in Puerto Rico. Same housing, same beautiful cars next to it. And yet, there are assets. I see a community that's thriving, that wants knowledge. I see that people will find a way, that we will find the way to pull out the assets that we need. And they may be unrecognizable to someone else, but I always see a glass half full. It's about the people. Abuelita here was amazing. She was the one who took us to that neighbor who really needed some health care. I actually was not working in healthcare. I was working in financial services at the time, but we were doing some general healthcare work in Puerto Rico. And these were the assets in the midst of this poverty that had us make impact on a small scale. The challenge for us is, how do we take it on the block level and expand it? We just have to look closely. What do you see? Right around the corner from Case. I see this is the Living Word, Living Truth nonprofit, next to a burned out building, a boarded up building. And across the other side of the greenery is Cleveland Clinic. 2.7 miles from where we sit today. I see two different business districts on either side of this university. One is thriving, when folks are just passing through. But I see assets. I have never seen a place like Cleveland that has everything we need. In fact, it's right here in this room. I see pride. It's actually a musician that was playing. I see knowledge. The same thing as Puerto Rico in a different form, right here in our community. I see assets, childcare, nonprofits, small businesses, taking care of our kids in our communities. I see the arts. It's just us. I see us. We have the right and the ability to do this here in Cleveland. And I see this. And my call to action today is, let's not just drive by this. That when I go 5 miles from where we sit today, we see what we invest in and what we disinvest in. 5 miles is to downtown. I have the privilege of working for Key. Use all the assets in this room. Shaker Heights, a former church. How can you have a church permanently closed 5 miles from here? South Euclid. Last night, I got a call from a woman who I'd worked with in Colorado. We were on that same collaborative. And she said, Helena, we did it. We did it. We kept doing the work. And this is the nonprofit that they created based upon the work that we did then. So I'm telling you, it just takes resilience. You just have to adhere to a set of goals, and you have to have faith. You have to have faith. But let's see what's around us in this bubble. Thank you. I think that CASE is the right place to begin to be the backbone of a collaborative impact project. And so there are 3x5 cards right here and over there. And if you want to lend your gifts, we all have gifts. I've accumulated mine, bits and pieces along the way, but we all have different gifts. Give us your name. Give us the phone number. We'll see what we can do together.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Helena. Folks, I have a mic here that anyone who wants to ask any questions, will just send this along to you. There's some people on the Zoom call as well. So if you speak into this, they'll hear it as well. So questions, comments, reactions.
There you go. Helena, this was, at least for me, really thought-provoking. And one of the things I kept thinking of, and there were many, is piecing together the community and the process, because the one key takeaway that I think all of us should probably have is obviously the fact that it's not an easy fix, fairly obvious statement, but it's also not a very linear progress, right? There's the sequential actions and then there's simultaneous actions. And the simultaneous actions are the hardest ones. And the framework certainly makes sense. But there's a number of stakeholders always around that you have to activate. Have you seen models that give you enough pattern recognition of what good looks like, what works? Okay, this is the sequence for these people have to be in first, or there's the government sector comes in last after it's been proven out, or the corporate. Like, are there patterns that you see that we could all learn from?
Yes, the first thing is that we're all members of the community, but I don't have any necessarily folks who are representing the community, right? We have to start there. We have to start there because they will tell us what we need, right? If we have something like a pandemic, right, that you just can't miss it, you have that sense of urgency because it's like that old phrase, I'm the government and I'm here to help, right? Nothing against governmental workers, I've been one. But we don't necessarily know it from an adoption perspective, what people will do. Typically, what I found is that people just need to take care of the everyday needs first. Let's not get complicated. I need food, right? In Puerto Rico, folks needed food, and that was our entree. And then you can begin to, because it is about trust, because it's not as if this isn't generations and generations of failed promises, right? Of being able to break down some of those silos and then supplanting it with something good. And then you can bring in some of those other systems. Often, when we're in diverse communities, individuals are wearing different hats. We are our philanthropists, right? Our doctors, the person who's going to mentor your child, going to send somebody, you know, to get help with their homework. But it's about recognizing those assets. I just moved to the Cleveland area, and you guys have something called a POS inspection, right? So I'm with my realtor, and I'm talking to a Black man who's the inspector. And he finds out who I am, and he's like, oh. And I was like, you have somebody who can help me with this? And gives me a card. And then he's like, well, what do you do again? And I told him again, and then he gave me another card because he also runs a foundation. So not only have I made friends with the inspector, talk to people. I got a line on a contractor to get some work done, and he's told me about his foundation. But he's doing what he thinks he needs to do for the whole in his community. And it's not to say that we aren't, so many funders in the room are folks whose organizations do funding that don't cover that. What was missing in the system that he had to go find his own? If we ask those questions, then we'll get to that. There are folks who can help us further around what is the particular order. I don't think that I have enough experience to tell us all of those answers, but I do know that it is listening and taking people at their word, and then later figuring out the why. It is a data-driven approach, but it is not research. You can't come into my community saying you want to do research. Call something different. Great question. Thank you. Am I off base, people? Yes, ma'am.
Get the
They've got a
mic.
thing they want to, a mic.
All right, let's send it down. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Will you talk a little bit about some of the collective impact principles and how you go about really getting there? Because you're dealing with potentially disparate people with disparate goals and a vision and, you know, like the failed program. But will you talk about how you get that collectiveness of that vision and being able to do it that way?
Yeah. These principles. So first of all, the issues are complex, right? And they've been going on for years, and there's systemic bias and all kinds of things. But you just start with one thing. That one thing will lead you to something else with a root cause. But if you can get people to agree on one thing, then you start from there. When I was speaking with, the woman's name is Terry last night, she said, Helena, we spent months just getting people around the table. In a corporate perspective, right, I do a lot of facilitation. I'd set up, I love a flip chart, and we go through our norms, right? But when stuff gets hard, when folks got a baby to feed, or they got a job that doesn't like it, how do you create the safety net for folks so that they can still come back into the collective, right? That's the hard work. It's all about people. The other principles, and I can send you some information. There's a lot of stuff out there around the collective impact model. But what I have found to be the difference is, one, asking your community what they need, and two, walking lockstep, three, being in it for the long haul. Right? This is legacy work for me, right? Somebody else is gonna have to take this baton. And how do we train up that next generation so that they can do that well? So they'll have to relearn everything that I learned or beat their head up against the brick wall. Yes, next two questions.
I was just wondering if you could speak a little bit to how such a diverse career helped you in your work today.
There's I'm stubborn. I'm stubborn. I will keep coming back to it. Don't tell me there's something I can't do. But I got unapologetic about doing stuff for my community. And so I tell people I didn't choose diversity, equity, and inclusion. It chose me. That I was taught to whom much is given, much is required. And how dare I sit at a table and not be able to speak up for somebody else who didn't have the opportunity to sit there. And so that's what's led me, is to just really dig deep and say, you know what? What's most important to me is faith, family, and community. And that's kind of my guiding principle. So that's what I did. And it took me a while to get there and not back up.
So I know you're relatively new at Key, but is there something, and that Key has been on this journey for a while. Is there one thing that you are hoping to accomplish at Key that excites you?
So I stand on the shoulder of giants. There is a woman named Margot Posey. I heard about Margot when I was managing the foundation in Colorado 15 years ago. Key has been on this journey for 20 years. And that's what attracted me to Key, that there were a lot of fundamental building blocks that were already there. So for someone who's just getting, or a company that's just getting into diversity, equity, and inclusion, God bless them, right? But for me to be able to have impact in the work and the type of impact that I wanted to have, I needed to work with a company that had been doing it for quite some time, right? My aspiration for Key, if I had a wish for Key, is that we prove the business case for diversity, equity, and inclusion. I chose to come back to a bank because economic development and DE&I go hand in hand. That one of their verticals is healthcare. That we're the second largest affordable housing lender in the country. And we're right here in Cleveland. How dare they import talent? We can do something together. I'm happy to be here. Yes.
All right. Oh, one more. Let's. Okay. Yeah.
And throw
it.
Hi, Helena. I'm Roxana. I use they, she pronouns. I'm curious. Often DE&I work can be very trauma informed and exhausting, doing the work hand in hand each day, especially depending on which communities you might be interacting with or just what you might be fighting against. So I'm curious, how would you advise everyone to find balance and find space in order to allow yourself to not get burned out or exhausted by continuing to do the work?
So something simple. Sometimes I just need to go take a nap. It's like, look, do not take yourself that seriously. Go lay down. Go sit down someplace. And you have to have a community of folks around you. And I've had an opportunity today and for the past 9 months that I've been here to begin to build a community. You also need to know that you know that you know. Thank you.
Folks, we probably have time for one more last question. Thank you.
So in your 9 months here, what's been the most amazing thing you've done? What have you enjoyed most about Cleveland so far?
I have enjoyed the people. It's a very warm community. Transparently, my position was remote. But when I see all of the ingredients that Key has, knowing what I know, Key may not know. Right? They do now. They thought they knew. This is a relationship work. You have to be in it. And so to see so many warm people, but also to see the challenge that we have, this is real, right? We are 50 years from the national agenda that was set for Black folks in 1972 in Indianapolis, right? 50 years from that, where we had one unified agenda, and we've gone so far from that. I'm a former dancer, and I found a place on the near west side that's called La Salsa. And so I have been going to salsa classes. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Helena. Before we adjourn to the reception, I wanted to thank a few people here who helped pull this event together, and endless meetings and lots of planning done by such committed individuals and such dedicated, passionate, in service of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And that's Deb Bibb and Anna Merdita and Andrew Medvedev and Ann Borchert and Rob Solomon and Tony Peebles, and I might,
and you,
and maybe, and many others. Thank you. Thank you for all the good work that is happening here at the university and also in our corporate community, and many of the chief diversity officers who are here as well. Thank you to all. And thank you to the people who came here to hear this talk. We continue this series, the Weatherhead Inclusive Excellence Distinguished Lecture Series. We will continue that over the next months and years as well. And we look forward to welcoming you back for this kind of series in the future as well. And now let's give one final round of applause to Helena.